Now, with Arsenal being back in pre-season, we can finally see some of the new signings play for the club. One of them was Cristhian Mosquera, who I think was excellent against Villarreal in the loss for Arsenal. And in this video, we're going to talk about why he is one of the bargain signings of the window. So let's get into it. Now, although there's yet again a lot of negatives to talk about with the game against Villarreal, I don't think Cristhian Mosquera was one. While someone that was signed for only around £13 million, he has often been disregarded as one of the most important signings for Arsenal this season and kind of put on the back burner in the same aspect of people like Norgard and Kepa as well. Now, Cristhian Mosquera is obviously more than that, being a backup not only in right back but in right centre back for Saliba, but he's also a player that is actually incredibly good and is good enough to play for Arsenal, already showing his high level already. Now, the first thing I think I want to highlight about his brilliance in this game was how well he is sort of climatized to the pressing compared to other players. Now, it wasn't perfect and there's things that he still needs to improve on, but ultimately I think his pressing level was actually really hard and he still showed a good amount of knowledge to actually be able to help us, and he wasn't a detriment to the team at all. Now, the first time I look at him, he played in right back in this game when he came on at half time. The right back has one of the most important jobs in the press for Arsenal, because when Arsenal really go man to man and start being aggressive on the press, they need to be able to pick up that big space in the deeper areas, which can be sometimes really hard. Now, the reason why this is super tough for Arsenal is because when we press, we sometimes get baited into situations we don't want to be in. What I mean by that, if you look at here with Woklz, he has now been pushed into this midfield and he can no longer cover the gaps to get to this other centre back, and if the ball's played quickly to him, that means that we cannot cover that from the left hand side to the quick transition to the right. Now, the way that we can sort of get around this for Arsenal is by using Saka, who has to go and press this guy as quick as he can, and usually he's in these sort of wider positions, so he has to come across to be able to do that. Now, when he does this, he not only has to be very quick to get at least something on the ball or try and stop the player passing it and block these passing lanes into this area, but he also needs to make sure that if the ball goes back to the goalkeeper, that he can continue to press. This means that you can block this sort of run when you allow the ball to go back to the keeper, which means the only pass to the keeper out is this lofted ball over to the left hand side here. Now, in this time that this is happening, Mosquera needs to be able to cover this entire area. He needs to be able to run all the way up here and make sure that this player cannot get past him and run into this space no matter what. If that's fouling him, if that's winning the ball back, it would be better, but ultimately he just needs to get here and stop this guy from really doing anything with it. Now, the reason why this is obviously important is because there's going to be runners like this guy who's going to get him behind. There's obviously this guy who can also run him behind as well, so you've got to be careful that Mosquera can make sure he can block this and these players don't completely dominate their one-on-ones. Now, in this game, Mosquera did that really well. We'll get into the big reason why at the end, but I think that's quite obvious. But ultimately, he was covering these gaps incredibly well and making sure that they couldn't get anything on it. He's a little bit overzealous sometimes and does get a little bit physical when you can calmly win the ball back maybe, but ultimately I'd rather a player be a little bit too physical, especially in these more attacking areas, than in defensive areas where it's necessarily a little bit more important, where you don't want to give away free kicks or get a yellow or red card. Not only that, when he played in right back, I thought he showed a brilliant level. He was very quick with his incisive passes through the channels, and every time the ball was received to him in these sort of edge positions, he was very good at lifting that ball over or putting the ball through for the team, which I really liked. And there's something I really liked about him overall was his overlapping work. Overall, on the ball, he is an incredibly confident player, but isn't necessarily going to do them really exciting passes. He is more just going to plop the ball around and be a bit more of a natural passer alongside a Zubimendi, who allows Zubimendi to do most of that really incisive through ball work. However, something he did do when Max Dowman came on was put the ball out wide to him and then go on a deeper overlap around him. Very much Ben White-esque, get into that byline. And although he didn't get the ball in this situation, yet again, the wingers probably should pass it into them fullback areas. He makes that run very quickly, which is a very important factor of him playing fullback if he is going to be for the club. However, right back is not necessarily where he is going to play fully for the team, and he's only going to be a backup there, probably playing more in centre back with Saliba needing less minutes. Now, when playing centre-back, when he came on, Gabriel was obviously in front of him, which obviously it was Gabriel's first game back, and I think he was a little bit rusty. And also it was Timber's first game back as well, so he's realistically the big defender in there that needs to do a lot of that heavy lifting, as he has played a little bit more than them over the last couple of weeks. Now, I will say that I was a bit confused by our pressing overall. I think it was a little bit sporadic and didn't know what to do in the second half. Rice was kind of coming into this space. He would turn up a little bit too late for my liking, and instantly that would be a good turn turn for the player to get around him, and then this left us in these situations where we were running back and trying not to get countered, which we ultimately ended up doing with one of the goals where they played the ball through Gabriel and they run onto it into these situations. Now, what we did in this game though, in these defensive areas, was that we know Mosquera can be seen as a more physical defender like a Gabriel. Something we spoke about on his tape before he joined is that he is that guy that wants to make these movements into these sort of positions and dominate these players. He doesn't want to be sitting back too much because he wants to be the one that's really affecting play while he has someone covering behind him, which is usually where he's played for Valencia over the last couple of years. Now, in this game, we did not do that. We knew Gabriel needed to be the more physical one, especially getting a bit more used to the sort of situation. So he was going up in these sort of areas and being at there with these players. This was a big problem. I do think he kind of struggled at time in his distances. Same with Rice, and this whole area was becoming a real big issue for us when we were trying to press, especially in that second half. But Mosquera, nonetheless, was not really having the same problems. Mosquera had this one-on-one here where I think they kick the ball long or they get the ball into one of these areas and we're too late on the press again where they can kick the ball over. And Mosquera in these situations one-on-one I felt like was incredibly comfortable. Before he came in, there was all this talk about him not being great in the air, and I still something that I have looked at quite a lot. Now in this game, I think defensively in the air he was incredible. Not only has he got a lot of composure in these areas, but he was heading the ball from long kicks towards him very dominantly in the air. But also there was one where they has that one-on-one here and he's able to put the ball down with his foot and let us break, which showed a brilliant level. There was a few headers I think in the attacking areas where I could definitely see him be a little bit lost with himself and didn't know where to kind of aim, but ultimately he still, when he has that jump in the defense and the space to kind of move into them areas, he can head the ball and be very dominant, which I think was something that was really making me very happy. Now, not only that, I do think the biggest thing we have to talk about Cristhian Mosquera is that this guy is insanely quick. I knew he was quick, but I don't think I realised just how quick he was when you compare him to a lot of the players we have in our team. Now, we spoke about it with the overlap earlier, but how quick he was. But the biggest explanation of how quick he was, not only with the pressing, which I do think makes it a little bit easier where you can cover ground that quickly, but the goal that Villarreal actually scored for the third one. Now, it's not his fault at all. It doesn't come from his side. He's coming over to try and help and just can't get there. But he covers nearly half the pitch in such a short amount of time that it genuinely feel like it was Gabriel ×2 in speed. And Gabriel is someone that is brilliant at covering ground like that anyway. He is absolutely rapid, and the more and more we can get him into these sort of confident positions, I think he's going to be more of a defensive type of player that really helps Arsenal calm things down than necessarily that natural passer you're going to see. Now, Cristhian Mosquera was not a player in this game that you had to squint to kind of figure out if he had a good game. I think we can all understandably say that he was one of our best players when he came on, in both right back and centre back, which is a key point. But looking at the stats in his half, he made 34 out of 35 passes, which is obviously a great level, 44 touches with 3 passes into the final third, obviously much bigger engagement than we've seen some of the other players have. Defensive numbers were all class, 1 tackle, 3 clearances, 1 headed clearance, 6 defensive actions and 1 recovery, which I expect to go up. I think his recoveries will be high this season. 2 out of 4 duels, 1 on the ground. He actually won both his aerial duels, so not being good in the air, didn't prove that in this game. Was fouled once, fouls committed was 2. He is going to be a player that commits a lot of fouls because he is very aggressive in these areas, and I think even more than Calafiori, but physically you need to be able to be like that in the Prem at the young age that he is to sort of be acclimatized and get used to it. Now, no way in anyone's minds is Cristhian Mosquera the most flashy player, the one that people care the most about, but ultimately he's a player that's really come in. I liked his cameo against Tottenham, but I think this performance was really class. And it's starting to get to that point where you don't worry about him coming into the team too much. You've got to see him a little bit more so we can get a bigger picture of it. But if people like Kivior are having a bad game, what can Mosquera do on the left centre-back role? What is he like with his Saliba? And even in right-back, I think that was what surprised me the most. He was class in that position. His pace is killer. So let me know what you guys think. If you want to see how we worked with Woklz in the team, please go and watch my video from earlier. And if not, I'll see you in the next one.